Hi, in this session we're going to be making a UI spline rig for our character's face. So we're going to start off with a rectangle. We need to make sure that the units are set to 1 by 1 in the 3dsmax scene. Now this is going to help us keep the maths as simple as possible. So we're going to put that into the middle of our scene as well in the coordinates 0, 0, 0. And we're going to make a copy of that scaled down. Now the scaled down version is going to be the button, so we're going to name it so. We want to make sure that everything that we make within this tutorial is named accordingly. So the outside one is going to also be called the controller. So we have button controller and we have the controller itself. Now we also want to make sure that they do not move separately. We want to make sure that they move simultaneously so that the button moves with the controller, but the buttons can still move on its own. So we're going to link the button to the controller. So now when we move the controller, we can see that the actual controller moves with, and the button does as well, but if the button is moved alone, then we don't have to. Right, we want to actually set some confines for this button, so we're going to go into the motion panel and the x-axis for the controller for the button. We're going to set a float limit, and we're going to do that for a 0.5 on the upper limit and minus 0.5 on the lower limit. Now that's to stop it from going outside of the box too much. We're going to do exactly the same on the Y position, on the float limit, and 0.5 and minus 0.5. So we should be able to see now that we can't move it outside of that box in those two axes. However, if we're in the perspective view, we can still sort of get it to go in and out in the z-axis, and we don't want that to happen. So what we're going to do is put another controller float limit on the z position, and we're going to change it to 0 by 0 so it doesn't move at all. Now you can see it doesn't move. Okay, so that's the basics of creating your first controller. Now with this, what we're going to want to do is to make multiple versions of it eventually. So having set up the float limits, we can scale this to whatever size we want and it's still going to work, but please make sure that you don't do any changes to the size before the float limits are set up. That's all the maths go wrong. One thing I do need to mention is when you're moving the button, you want to stay within the parent instead of view for the movement, because this will allow us to centralize the button to the middle coordinates at the bottom of our screen rather than having to try and figure out where it is. So we're going to make a copy. Now we want to make a different kind of controller. We want to do one that can only move up and down in an axis point. This one's going to control the winking of one of our eyes. With this one we need to make a slight adjustment to the, I think it's x-axis, but we're going to rename it first, so it's wink controller and wink button, and the other one's going to be brow button and brow controller. So we're going to scale the controller in and so that we only have the up and down, so we have the visual of it as well. So we click on the button, go into the X position, double click it, and we're going to change that from 0.5 to 0 like we did with the Z axis. So now what we should see is we can't move it side to side, we can only move it up and down. One thing I want to do is add some text to our spline UI so we know what we're actually looking at each time we use it. We may have a whole screen full of this, so we want to make sure that we know which ones which we're controlling. So this one's going to be the browse, and the other one we're going to do as a wink. Now we have to make sure that we can do each side of the face separately. So we're going to actually name one of them wink right and one of them wink left. So if we do the left one first, then we can copy over what we've done for the wink right in a moment. So we want the actual text to stay with the controllers as well. So like we had before, we're going to link them to it. So we're just going to make the wink right while I'm thinking about it. And then we're going to link them together and put them somewhere where we can manage the two winks separately to the browse. So put them underneath like they would be on the actual head model. So now we're going to change the name of this one so that when we do some basic programming later on, we won't forget which one's the left and which one's the right. So if we link that one to the wink, and that one to there, and finally to there. So they all should move with the controllers. Just going to save this now so that I can come back to this if all else fails. And also I can use them again if I need to. So I'm just going to call them the controllers. I can import them into any Max scene and they should work. So I'm going to scale them to a point where they might fit the rest, because I'm going to need to import my face model and all of the poses in which I've created previously. Thanks to Lewis for doing those. So we need to merge them into our scene. Select them all and import. As you can see, they're a bit smaller than what our rig is, so we're just going to grab the rigs that we've created and shrink them down so that they appear quite nicely in the front view next to our main head model that we're going to be doing all the rest of our bits and bobs to. Just want to get them to the size so that we can see them at the same time as what we can see the head when we look at the model, so we're not going to faff around too much. Okay, so with that, with our head model, we want to put a Morpher modifier onto the object because we need to set up the changes that it's going to be. So we're going to right click in the empty slot and click on every one of the poses so that we have them set up into the Morpher. Simple process, just a bit long and tedious, so just bear with it and make sure that you get all the targets from the scene so that we can use them for animating a little later on. Once you've done that, what we're going to do is we want to set up some of these controllers now. So we're going to have to use something called the Reaction Manager. Now that's in the animation panel, so we're going to open that up. Now this relies on us adding a master, so the button is going to be our master, so the transform position, that's going to be the Y position, because it only goes up and down. And we need to add it slave, something that's going to control. Now that's going to be our wink. So we're going to go to Modified Object, Morpher, and we're going to select the right side eye closed. Now it gives us states, we're going to delete them because we want to make our own. We're going to move the button all the way to the top. We're going to create a state. Now it's going to show us the value, and we need to change, well, make sure that value is 0 when it's at the top because we want the eyes open. We're going to change the name of the state. Now it's important to do this because else you won't remember which one of the states it's actually controlling what part of the animation. So we're going to aim to name these as well as possible as well. So right eye open is going to be at the 0 value for that morpher. When we move it down, we want to set another state, and this is when we're going to have the right eye closed. And we're going to set the name to that. And we also need to change the value to 100. Just double click in the value point, press enter. So now you can see when we move the piece of UI up and down, we'll get the wink happening on our screen. Now that's the first step that we're going to be looking at within the reaction manager, but we also need to do the same with some of the others as well. So we need to add the other controllers as masters as well. So the button's always the controller or the master. So we're setting that up exactly the same as what we did with the other eye. So we're adding the slave, which is now the left eye closed. We need to get rid of the states, so we're going to delete that. Once again, put it to the top, create state for its position. We're going to make sure that the value is at 0 and we name it left eye open. Oh, they can become a little bit confusing at times. Just make sure you take your time with each one of them, and you know what the values are set at. So we need to change the closed to 100 for this one, and then it will show us exactly the same as what we did with the other side of the face. Now they're the simple controllers because we've only got one sort of axis point up and down. We need to set up the brows now, and they're going to be a little bit different. We've got multiple different directions, so we're going to set the button for this one, and it's going to be the transform. Well, it's going to be the controller. It's wheeled space rather than a specific position. Now we need to make sure that we set ourselves its slave. Now this one is going to be both the modified object morpher of the brow on the right hand side up and the left hand side up. So we need to set up both of them as being slaves. Simply clicking morpher and then the left brow up as well. So delete the states again so we can make our own. We don't want them. So we're going to move this into a position to start our states. So if we move it to the top right, we create a state, and we want to make sure that this one has the right name convention. So we're going to do right. No, it's the left hand side. Let's do it for the actual what we see in front of our face. Then it's a lot easier to see. So left brow up. Bearing in mind that the actual left brow is on the right hand side of our UI, so it's kind of the opposite. Set a state for the opposite side of our button as well. Do that as the right brow up. Change the value for the right one. So change that to 100. And then on the other one, the opposite one needs to be 100. So just take your time with this because it can be a little bit confusing. As you see now, the flick between the two eyebrows looks pretty good. We need to do it for the opposite though, so that when they are down, they work as well. So we're going to set the state for each of them down as well. So let's move it to that side. Set state. I change this one so that it's left brow down. We need to make sure that they're both set to 0. And then move it across and do exactly the same on the opposite side. give it a new state with right brow down. Let's make sure it's the same. And what this does then is it sets it up really quite nicely so that it gives us a gradient of how much the brows move from the top to bottom as well. Okay. And we can see that it moves quite nicely between the two of the eyebrows. It allows us to put some sort of emotion into our animation a little bit later on. Just going to center those. And we're just going to make one last little slider that's going to be a combination. Now I'm just going to flick these two over so they correspond with the same sort of conventions as what the brows have got, so that we have the left on our right hand side and the right on our left hand side like they would be, because we're facing the actual model of the face. We don't want to confuse ourselves. So we're going to copy over one of these controllers, and we're going to name this one our mood controller, because we're going to do happy and sad, because we've got those in our Morpher. Now you can actually do them with any type of opposites, mouth open, mouth closed, happy, sad, an angry and shock perhaps, anything in which you like. Now with this one it's a slight bit different again, because we've got two different morphers that we want to go from, as opposed to just sort of gradient them from 0 to 100. So we're going to have to edit them slightly more so than what we would do with some of the others in the reaction manager. So we're just going to put the names happy to sad, so happy at the top, sad at the bottom, and just make sure they're named properly in our Max scene as well, so that whenever we select anything we know exactly what it is. It's quite difficult when we've got a lot of them going on. So once we've done that, we need to add that button as the master and its position in the y-axis, because it's going up and down. Add its slave, click on the face. We want to do the morpher of the happy, and we want to add the sad as well. If you take your time with this and go slowly, it's relatively simple. It's only when you try to sort of go too fast that it makes it all confusing. So we're going to set a state with it at the top, and we're going to set it to happy 100, and we need to name that as well in state conventions, but we're going to move it down, create our other state, and this one's going to be happy 0 and our sad 100. Just going to name them. Okay, so these work a little bit differently, as I said. So we're going to make it 0 again, so it's halfway, and we need to create another state. Now this is why it helps to actually have our sort of parent selection on, so that we can just 0 it out. Now this is going to be our neutral. As you can see, the values are set to 50-50. We don't want that. We want them set to 0 and 0, so that it zeroes out. As you can see, the graph changing below, there's a slight difference in what the actual animation is going to look like for the face. So if we just show you that, as we can see, it goes happy, and then it goes to sad. It gives us a nice little transition between the two in the animation. And we can edit that as much as you like as well. It's a lot like any other graph in the curve editors. You just edit the lines by adding in new nodes and moving them around. Okay, for this next part we're going to be adding some bones to this head. I'm going to hide the hair. I'm going to right click on the head model, go to object properties, going to set the visibility to 0.1, make sure that show frozen grey is off, freeze it, And now we're going to build a little rig. So we're going to go into helpers, go to cat objects, cat parent, make sure it's on none, go to top view, zoom in, I'm going to create that, move it down underneath the neck. We're going to go to the modify panel, create pelvis, move that down, going to scale it so that it fits the overall outline of the bottom of the neck. Okay, let's move that slightly up. And we're going to add a spine. I'm going to click on one of the spine links and we're going to change that from 5 to 3 because we want it to just be a neck. This one we're going to rename the head. This one we're going to name neck base. And then we're going to name that one neck 01, neck 02, and neck 03. Then we're going to scale these three so that they fit inside the neck as well as possible. Slightly move them up and make sure that they are not too big. With the head, we are then going to go to the modify list and we're going to put an edit poly modifier on it, and we're going to edit the shape of the object. But first of all, it's going to move it up so we've got it in the right position. Want to make sure it gets the majority of the head, so that we can make the changes. So this bit here, I'm going to move to the front of the mouth, that to the back of the head. I'm also going to select this and move it over to that outside of the head. Can we do it with both simultaneously? Nope. And the front view so we can see it a bit better. All the way to the outside. That one all the way to the outside. Move that one to the top of the head. So we have something that starts to look like this. It's going to add a few changes to it because we want to make sure that the neck isn't in control too much of the front of the head. So we're going to add one of these, a connect in there, and we're going to move that to there. Going to do another one. Move that slightly up. So we've got the shape of the chin in there, like so. And then we're going to add one here. Go to the back of the head. And that should hopefully do it. So once we've done that, we're going to right click, collapse to. So now we've got a custom shaped rig. What we should see is when we rotate it that the neck will rotate with it. That's what we're wanting for the whole face to do, and the pelvis, which is the neck base, is going to stay still. So we're going to have to try and rig this to the rest of it. We may need to delete one of the neck links at some point. So what we're going to do is I'm going to unfreeze the head because I'm going to need to add a skin modifier to it. So we're going to add skin. We're going to need to add bones. Now we've got the neck base we need to find. We need to open up all these parts here. So we can click all of those. So we've got 5 bones it's connected to. And what I'm going to do when that's done is I'm going to right click and I'm going to freeze it again. But I want to turn this up so I can see it a little bit more. So I'm going to go to 3 instead. Then I'm going to select the head and the neck bones, because I want to see what changes it's doing. I'm going to do similar to this, so I'm going to make this 0.1, but I'm not going to freeze it because I want to still be able to edit the what the head is doing. So if we click the head, we should be able to see what the neck is doing so far. Okay, so that's quite nice. But if you want to do any changes, then you'll have to go into your skin modifier and do some. I'm quite happy with that though. Okay, now that we've got the skin sorted, we're going to have to connect the hair and the eyes to the actual rig so it moves with it all as well. So we're going to need to select all of our bones in the rig, and we're going to make them renderable again in the visibility column so we can see them, because the actual properties of the next part will take on board them for the hair and the eyes as well. So we're going to click on the eyes. We're going to link the eyes to the skull and the hair to the skull bone as well. So what we should see then is when we move the head, is that the hair and the eyes move with it as well, which is exactly what we want. Now what we want to do is set up the eyes to move on their own simultaneously. If you made them as subtools, you're likely to have them currently connected together as one thing. We need the left and the right eye to be separate. So what we're going to have to do, select one of them in the element column and detach it, and we're going to have to make this one right eye, and the same with the other. Really the only difference here is now that they're two objects is that the hierarchy is in the wrong place, so we're going to affect pivot only and send it to object, and we're going to do the same with the other one so that they rotate around their center point that we have here. So in order for us to set up now the eyes to actually move, what we need to do in the top view is to make two helpers. Going to standard, and we're going to need a dummy, and we want another one. So if we hold shift, we're going to create another one like so. So we've got dummy 1 and dummy 2. I'm going to call one right eye dummy and the other one left eye dummy. Okay, go in the front view. Okay, sitting right in front. Let's move them a little bit further in front. Okay, and we're going to want to put some text in there as well so that we can tell that it is the eyes that it is affecting. So it's rather large at the minute. Change max text to eyes. Lower the size down so it's suitably small enough. Put that in the top view in front of the two of them. Then enables us to control them from that then as well. So we've got these two dummies. Now they need to make them of some use. So what we're going to have to do is to put some constraints onto them. It's going to change the color of this so we can see it to white in the viewport. So whenever we click it off, they can turn up as well. So I'm going to click on the right eye, go to animation, I'm going to go to constraints, we're going to go to look at constraint, and we're going to click on this dummy. Now we see the rotation of the eyes slightly changed, so what we're going to have to do is to change that in the motion panel so that it goes back to the original offset. So we're going to click there, click keep initial offset. We're going to do exactly the same thing on the opposite side for the other eye. Look at constraint at the dummy, click on the keep initial offset. Then what we're going to do is we need to link these two dummies to the eye text. So we're going to click on that, link it to the I text, click on that, and link it to the I text. Make sure that we've done it. Okay. What we should see then is that each of these dummies can be done separately, so the eye moving, but also if we move the text, we see both of the eyes moving, which is what we want to be able to accomplish for our rig. For the whole of the face is to be able to move the eyes of where it's looking at during the animation. Okay, once you've done that, we're going to need to save again just to make sure that everything is kept before we start doing any more of the animation. So now we have the UI set up, we have the eyes set up, we have the head rig set up, and all we've got left to really do once we're happy with all of our controllers is to actually start animating. Now for this, what we're going to need to do is to make sure that you click onto your model and you go within your Morpher to change some of this. But to make it easier when animating, we're going to select all of our bones to start off with, and we're going to hide them because we want to pay as much attention to one step at a time. So the way in which we're going to go about it is get the lip sync right. We're going to do the mouth, then we're going to do the eyelids, then we're going to do the eyebrows, then we're going to do the eye movement. So we want to keep it nice and easy for us so we don't have any confusion. Okay, so first of all, in order to start the lip sync animation, we're going to need to add in some sound, so we're going to need to import it. So we're going to click on our curve editor. Now we're going to double click on where it says sound, and we're going to have to add in our file. So we're going to find your WAV file. Now 3dsmax only really supports in this column a WAV or an AVI file, so you'll need to convert anything in which you've got to help out your actual sound. So we found this, our little WAV file. We need to open it, and what we'll find then is that we are enabling it in order to play from the start to finish of that. We can change the point in which it plays at, so we can permit the playback, we can change where the start of the sound is, where the end frame sound is, etc., and then go from there in order to OK it. Okay, so now we need to have a go at animating it. So what we're going to see is that we're going to need to start to try and mimic what is happening on our screen. So how we do this is based on phonemes, so this the way in which our mouth sort of sounds or looks at the same time as it sounds. So we're going to use the Morpher to try and animate that. So ha for the hello is more of an E sound, so we try to set our first key and then put the Morpher up to 100 on that, so we should hit ha. Just play it through, and then we've got a hell, so the next one's a L sound, so we want to do that on the Morpher as well with the L. But we've got the other one still, so we put that one back down, so it's a hull sound. Now we need an O, so we're going to move up the O and lower the L, so we've got a hell, but we've still got the original O on, so we're lowering that. So now we've got a hello, but we need a W sound, so we need to use the U now as well. Hello. I'm going to move them slightly closer together to see if it makes much of a difference. You can hold whilst hovering over any keyframe and drag and move them. If you want to copy them, hold shift can move them at any point so that they do what you want them to.
Hello. 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 Well. Hello.
Okay.
Hello.
Just going to lower the L again.
Hello.
At that point.
Hello. Welcome to Gamer.
Okay, so that looks a bit better.
Hello.
There's a lot of tweaking happens through this, so you'll be going to and fro along the track bar to try and get the best possible result. Okay, so now we're going to use the U, so the w sound at the end. So scroll down to that, put that to 100, and then lower the O. But the O and the U give us a nice w sound, so it helps it out a bit. So if we leave that slightly on there, and we need to make sure that we zero that out for the previous frame.
Hello, welcome to Gamer.
But now we need to get it to return back to it being normal. So we need to zero everything out in terms of mouse sounds at the end.
Hello, welcome to Gamer.
Go.
Hello,
So
welcome to
it's
Gamer.
starting to match it, but it's looking rather lifeless at the minute because it's only with the mouse.
Hello, welcome to
So
Gamer.
the more and more changes that we do to it, the better and better our animation will look. So keep going through your animation, slightly tweaking it. It's called tweening, to get the result that you like the look of.
Hello,
keep playing it through.
Go.
Hello, welcome to Gamer.
You can also change the playback features so that you can just concentrate on a certain piece. It won't get rid of any of the work that you've done originally. You can change them back.
Hello.
So if I show you how to do that in a second. Go to time configuration, change start time to what you need it to be and the end time to what you need it to be. The frames become a lot larger, and you just have that active time segment to go through.
Hello, 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 hello,
Start to look alright. Some slight adjustments.
Hello, 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 hello.
Okay, turn auto key off, and I'm just going to mess about with some of the other values as well, so we're not animating them. Okay, so I'm going to do some slight changes to other things now as well. So let's start by changing what's happening with the happy and sad. Zero that out. Need to make sure it's on parent. See that when we don't have a piece of UI that is on parent, it's on view instead. It doesn't work as well to zero it out. So I'm just going to click that and see zero on that function. We'll keep it nice and neutral. So
hello, 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 hello.
I quite like the look of that now.
Hello, 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 hello.
Now we're going to try and get the sequence of the H and the head movement working at the same time. So we're going to try and edit the head. So we're going to unhide our bones. So what we're going to need to do is put an animation layer on our tool. So go to the motion panel, ABS layer, so an absolute layer, turn it on, and from there what we want to do is to try and animate the head.
Hello.
Okay, so now what we want to try and do is get some of the head animation to follow up with our actual sound of the mouth movement. So we're going to move the head upwards when it goes he, and down when it goes low. So if we play that back through,
Hello.
so it looks like it's
Hello.
playing.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Gives it a
Hello.
bit more character.
Hello.
So we're going to do some slight changes to that. I'm going to give it some slight rotation, so it's not just centralised. Test some things out, see if I like it. If not, then I go back to whatever I like and move all the frames about. But I think I've got ish what I'm happy with there. Now we're going to continue to do some things with the brows and with the eyes to make it look more realistic. So when it goes he, up at the top, we're going to move the eyebrows upwards. So first of all, I'm going to set them so that they don't change at the start. So set the key. And when they're at the top, I'm going to move them both up. Just make sure they're both working. Yep. So my eyebrows of the character raise when his head goes up, and when it comes down, we're going to move them down to the bottom. Now if you want to restore them back to the middle afterwards, then you can go and do this, but I actually quite like the visual of it staying down there. I'm going to combine that with a slight shock on the Morpher as well in a moment when it goes up. So it's going to do these slight in-betweens. Or tweening, rather. And I also want to make it blink. So what we're going to do is we're going to have start the eyes open. And when we set the key and we're going up, we're going to go down and set them here, and when it goes all the way to the bottom, we're going to close the eyes, and then we're going to go some more frames and open them again, so we've got a bit of a blink, so when we see the animation, it's looking more and more lifelike.
Hello. 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 Hello.
Which is quite good. Now I want to add that shock that I was talking about, just to add to the actual visual. To see what it's like step by step. Always aiming to make some good adjustments if possible to the final piece. So I'm going to go into the Morpher, and I'm going to set a slight shock on the upwards motion of the head as well. Make sure it's zeroed out. Go to the up point. Turn up the shock. Don't know if I'm going to go all the way, but enough so it is noticeable. And then at the start I'm going to zero it out again so that you can see it only happening when the head goes upwards, and zero it out. So it slightly moved the mouth as well, but I think I quite like that visual. It exaggerates it a little bit more.
Hello. 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 Hello.
I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial.
Hello.
And I hope you enjoy animating your own face models.